Hello, and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of Fortinet and Carahsoft, I would like to welcome you to today's webcast, Back to Business as Usual, Return to Work Securely with Fortinet. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Please direct all of your questions to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to answer all of your questions at the end of the presentation. If for some reason we do not get to your question, the Fortinet team at Carahsoft will follow up with you after offline. This webcast is being recorded and a link will be sent out in a follow-up email for you to view it again or share it with a colleague. Before we introduce today's presenters, I would like to tell you a little bit about Carahsoft. Carahsoft is the trusted government IT solutions provider and a top GSA schedule holder, supporting an ecosystem of manufacturers, resellers, integrators, and consulting partners committed to serving the public sector. The dedicated cybersecurity and defense team at Carahsoft specializes in providing federal, state, local, and education customers with a variety of cybersecurity solutions to secure their cyber ecosystem. Our contact information will be at the end of the presentation, so please don't hesitate to contact us for any of your needs. At this time, I would like to introduce to you our speakers for today, Ed Holt from Fortinet and Patrick Connor from GCOM. Ed and Patrick, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Julie. Let me get my presentation up here. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Got a packed agenda. As Julia said, I'm here with Patrick Connor. He's GCOM Software VP of Infrastructure Modernization, and I'm a Fortinet Solution Specialist. And we're going to be talking about Fortinet Secure SD-WAN. And so there's really a digital transformation going on right now, and we're going to talk about securing your WAN edge. The agenda really is an introduction to the Fortinet Security Fabric. We're going to look at kind of a customer profile of what SD-WAN customers are looking at or looking for in that digital transformation. We're looking at our value proposition, security networking or security-driven networking. We're the leader in the Magic Quadrant, some zero-touch provisioning so that you can just ship this gear out and it phones home, and then a customer profile. And the best part of everything here is really Patrick's demo, the exciting part. So the Fortinet Security Fabric, if you wanted to spend a little bit of time on our website, you can learn a little bit more about it, but I'm just going to hit a couple of highlights. But it starts with our FortiOS. This is an operating system that's been around for 20 years. It's built from the ground up. It's all about security. What Fortinet wants to do with the Security Fabric, it's really broad, integrated, and automated. The broad portion is really protecting everything from, say, the Internet of Things to the cloud, or from that client device to the data center. Integrated is we're really managing and monitoring and be able to share information across all our different disciplines and products. And then automated, which is really, if there is a threat in your network, we can take action. And so again, I would encourage you to spend a little bit more time. I'm just highlighting it. So an SD-WAN customer profile. This is kind of customers that are really going through that digital transformation and they're reshaping the way they do business. And it's not really a vertical, it's really all these customers, and you probably fall into one of them, probably mostly the government, but maybe a K through 12 could be a district office with all the schools. You could have a lot of retail centers out there, maybe restaurants, maybe banking with a data center and all the banks out there, healthcare with the remote offices for, healthcare offices, that kind of thing. But they're really going through a digital transformation, and it's typically 3 or more locations, maybe have a small number of employees at some of them, or it could be a large campus with several hundred employees. They might have an MPLS network where they're sending all the traffic over MPLS to a headquarters or data center. They're moving all their apps maybe to the cloud, or most of them. They want that better user experience for their customers' employees. They may have had an merger and acquisition, where now they have different products at different locations, and they're doing a infrastructure consolidation. Some of the employees could be working remotely too. And then internet traffic is increasing at 20% per year. But that's what kind of the profile of the customer that we're talking about today. I'm assuming you'll fall into one of those categories. Just to let you know, Fortinet has pioneered secure SD-WAN technology for many, many years. This is even before it was called SD-WAN. It was link load balancer. And really the best thing about Fortinet is we want to provide simplification in your network and a lot of functionality, be able to secure those cloud apps, get a better user experience, and then reduce your costs and reduce complexity. In Fortinet's world, complexity is the enemy of security. So we kind of look at the drivers and the challenges. The drivers today really for SD-WAN is that digital transformation. They want to provide those new services to their customers. They're consolidating their WAN vendors. Maybe they have multiple vendors out there and they really want to work with one vendor. They have multiple locations, which we've already described. They may be adding more remote sites through organically or through M&A. They want to reduce their OpEx costs. They're outsourcing their applications to maybe a service provider and it's gotten really expensive. Maybe they want to take that in-house too. But use of cloud applications is the biggest driver. So they're moving from maybe a CapEx to an OpEx plan. And then they're working with Amazon, Azure, Google, that kind of thing. They're moving some of their applications to a SaaS applications like O365, Salesforce, or Workday. Some of the challenges that they have is delivering those new services. And that's what they're thinking about. They want to have their network to be application aware, where that solution can dynamically select the best WAN, provide that high level of service level agreement. They want to manage, have that quality of service on their WAN. They may have had a bolt-on security needs, but they want to integrate it or increase their security needs. They've got compliance and reporting requirements. They want to reduce their cost. They really want to have the networking security and decrease networking security related operating expenses. They want to reduce that complexity. And then they want to essentially manage all their on-premise devices, their cloud, and their wireless infrastructure. So that's what we're seeing today. These are the drivers and challenges when moving to SD-WAN, even SD-branch. Fortinet is really best of breed. What we've taken is SD-WAN and we have our next generation firewall. And now we call it secure SD-WAN because it's managing, monitoring all the SD-WAN. And if you look at the components of that, Fortinet has built what we call custom ASICs or security processing units. These help with network performance and content and inspection. And then you can also do SSL encryption or decryption. And then you don't really have to, with these security processors, you don't really have to balance between performance and security. We also have our threat intelligence. This is FortiGuard Labs. This is obviously going to help block spam, malicious websites, block phishing attempts, malware programs, and then network infrastructure attempts. Again, it's all powered by FortiOS. So we do have licenses for application control, IPS, web filtering. We have anti-malware and cloud sandbox. But what's cool about it is we also have a WAN path controller at no charge built in, the routing's built in, and our WAN optimization. Included into the next generation firewall is we have the zero touch deployment. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we can manage everything from a single management console called FortiManager or FortiAnalytics. We're the recognized leader in network firewalls and WAN infrastructure. So leader in the network firewalls, WAN infrastructure, which is SD-WAN, and then in the visionaries quadrant for wired and wireless. This is all from a single platform, the FortiGate next generation firewall. So if you look at networks today, enterprise WANs, you might have a remote office here, you might have an MPLS connection, maybe to a data center, and then you have your private cloud and public cloud, where everything rotates and moves through the data center using MPLS and routes back. So it's hairpinning all that traffic, which could be very, very expensive. What we're doing with SD-WAN is really breaking out those different technologies. So that remote office could go MPLS if it had to for voice and video. And then depending on latency, jitter, packet loss, it could actually redirect that traffic to maybe a different tunnel based on thresholds. You could also load balance that if you needed to. And this, again, this is all built into the FortiGate. And then you could do an internet breakout like we had talked about today, where you could go to the public cloud for Salesforce or O365. And then those remote users at that office or remote location could just get directly to the internet. The ability to make things really, really simple. I know, Patrick, you had some comments or maybe some thoughts on this, or let me just take a pause real quick. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, in today's world, we are moving our applications everywhere, and the enterprise SD-WAN, the use of the transport independence of the solution, it really doesn't matter what type of connectivity you have. It all depends on where your users are and where the applications or resources they're trying to get to. And the SD-WAN solution can allow you to best utilize that, including monitoring the links for performance for the end user experience, and shifting traffic dynamically over the best path at that time for that session, given the criteria and testing priorities that we set in place within the configurations. So it really does help alleviate a lot of the underlying concerns about the internet can't get QoS and the SLAs on internet service providers are questionable. We can take advantage of utilizing testing and all of the links over any type of transport to make that work.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yep.
So if you kind of look at what we call the traditional network and then Fortinet security-driven networking, on the traditional side, there's a number of components out there at the remote location. There could be the router, maybe a firewall from a different vendor, an Ethernet switch, wireless access points if you need it, and then some type of client or NAC application to support your Internet of Things. These could all have different management consoles, different upgrade cycles, that type of thing. So potentially very, very complicated out there at the remote side. Fortinet security-driven networking, what we have today is our FortiGate. Includes all the routing and the firewall components. And then we can add on our switches and access point, the secure access side. They become extensions of the firewall. So every SSID is a interface on the firewall, and you can apply security policies. Every VLANs, whether it's on the first switch in the first port or the 20th port on the 100th switch, they become interfaces. You can manage and monitor everything from the Fortinet firewall. So configure, manage, traffic inspection, policy implementation, optimization, and logging. We do have FortiNAC, so if you want to profile those Internet of Things devices out there, you can do that. Sometimes that, it's more cost effective for, say, a larger organization, but if you had a smaller organization, we do have NAC built into the FortiGate. And I'll show that here in just a second. So the next slide here is really zero touch provisioning. So if you've got over there, we have FortiManager. So if you have many, many locations, they can manage all the FortiGates in your network. So a single point of entry to manage all your network. And then we have FortiCloud, and we have a SKU called FortiDeploy. And when you purchase the product today, all those serials number be registered in the cloud. So once you get your APs, your switches, your FortiGates, you just unplug it, connect it to the internet. FortiCloud will recognize it. It has all those serial numbers, and it'll notify FortiManager of those devices. FortiManager now can send the configuration to the FortiGate as it phones home, and now it has all the configurations, and now the FortiGate using FortiLink, which is standard protocols that we bundled together so that the gate can talk to the switches and APs, you can push that configuration out to those devices too. So zero touch provisioning using FortiDeploy and FortiManager. Very easy. If you look at security-driven networking, it's made up of three components, our AP switches and FortiNAC. From an AP perspective, we've got over 25 enterprise class APs, both internal and outdoor APs, or indoor and outdoor. We have internal and external antennas on all of them. They're all Wi-Fi 6, which that's the latest and greatest standard. All our APs can be remote APs. So if you took one home or we're in a hotel, you could broadcast the same SSID like you do at the office and get connected, tunnel that traffic back to a FortiGate. There's no licenses to make this happen. It really becomes plug and play. Every FortiGate today can manage a number of switches and a number of APs. And so it's really a plug and play. Again, we use that technology called FortiLink. From a switch perspective, we've got over 38 models. We've got edge switches, data center or distribution switches. Again, we use FortiLink to manage all that. We have uplink speeds of 1, 10, 40 gigabit, and even 100 gigabit uplink. So we can build that network as fast as you need it to go. And then we have FortiNAC, which is our centralized knock and sock for identifying those devices out there. It comes in VM or hardware options. The FortiGate actually acts as a sensor and works with FortiNAC today. I'd actually mentioned that we have a NAC. We actually call it FortiLink NAC. So if you have a gate out there in your network and you want to use this feature and functionality, there's no additional charge for that. We actually have universal port configuration. So you need no additional hardware. We want to simplify your network deployment, but you can apply it to all switches or any specified ports on the network. This NAC, FortiLink NAC, can discover the devices by MAC address, hardware vendor, device family type, OS user, put it in appropriate VLAN. We can also configure based on LLDP, quality surface 802.1x, and VLAN. So it's all built in if this is something you might be interested in. I want to kind of talk about a customer profile. This is a large customer. They're an environmental solution provider. They've actually got about 42,000 employees, 1,200 locations, 21,000 customers, on and on. It's a 24/7 operation, but they had a managed MPLS network that was costing $28 million a year, about $1,900 a month for each location. And they were getting ready to do a refresh, and they really wanted, they wanted to reduce costs. Some of these locations, obviously being, let's call it a dump, they're out in remote locations. It's hard to get internet connectivity. So they were getting sometimes only 1.5 meg of throughput out there, but they had a lot of outages. And so when the trucks would come in and they had to weigh the trucks for the recycled goods so that they could get paid, sometimes the network was down, and it really caused a lot of problems for them. Troubleshooting was basically in the dark. It was a one-off. They had multiple point products. There was a lot of siloed, devices out there. So it was very, very complicated to manage and monitor all this, even that they had a managed service provider. So what they did is when they went out and looked, they wanted a network that was application aware, so it could prioritize their voice and video. They wanted an internet breakout for O365, and they wanted to have better business applications and higher performance. So they had that multi-path intelligence they were looking for. If there were some packet loss, it could direct the traffic in different ways so that they reduce that latency and jitter. And then they wanted really simplified management. They want to take everything to manage all their network. They didn't want bolt-on security. They wanted security integrated into their network, and they wanted it simple. So when they finally deployed all those locations, they did it in less than 6 months. They moved from $28 million in WAN cost to $8 million a year, and they had over $100 million in savings over 5 years. They reduced their troubleshooting in their network, and they increased the performance to like O365 and those business applications by 20%, 20 times. And they supported central management. They got more visibility and control, less IT tickets. And so very, very good outcome for a large customer like this using Fortinet's SD-WAN SD branch. So now we're moving on to the demo. I'm going to pass it over to Patrick, and he's going to kind of highlight some of these things for you.
Welcome all. Again, as we indicated, I'm Patrick Connor. I'm the Vice President of Infrastructure Modernization with GCOM. And surprisingly, in a prior life, the demonstration or the example that Ed used was a client that my organization built the pilot for and developed the Fortinet solution for that success. So I'm quite happy that he used that one as an example. What we're going to talk about here is a much smaller deployment. I want to go through and share the actual interface, how we're going to talk about how the network is built, how SD-WAN is built, how you can apply policies, and then take a look at the visibility and some of the benefits that come with this solution. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. And we will continue on. So this solution actually is for a smaller organization. It is a citywide organization that has a relatively small footprint. They're consolidating down to 4 distinct locations plus cloud services. They were originally on a small legacy MPLS environment, very low bandwidth, with a pair of internet hubs out of 2 of these facilities, everybody hairpin through one or the other. Because of the low latency or the low bandwidth capabilities, they struggled with a highly complex policy-based routing solution to get certain traffic vendors or certain traffic flows through one site or the other. Caused a lot of complexity in the environment and reduced the amount of troubleshooting and by moving to an SD-WAN solution. What you're looking at is one of their 2 main sites. This is the status page on every FortiGate that you log into. Gives you a bunch of the basic information. What we're going to look at to start with is, as you define out your networks, as Ed said, there is a lot of granularity that can be done with the SD-WAN or SD Office solution. This particular deployment is comprised of FortiGates, FortiSwitches, and FortiAPs to provide all of the access services, including the data center access services for this client. Network interfaces, as you go through and build out, you define an SD-WAN interface, which is a logical construct, including all of the endpoints within that SD-WAN organization. In this particular case, they have a pair of internet providers. In this solution, we have dropped the MPLS and gone with a pair of diverse carrier internet services at a business class at each location. That is, increase the costs or increase the available bandwidth and services, but decrease the cost significantly per meg of capabilities. With that, you have a Verizon and a Comcast business circuit. They are the primary underlayment and the transport, and then the tunnels. Now, unlike the example Ed showed, which was a 2 data center hub and spoke deployment, this is actually a full mesh deployment because they do operate services out of every location. So it's a little bit of different topology, but the solution works perfectly well in both hub and spoke, multi-hub and spoke, and in a full mesh. It just gets a little, obviously, as you go full mesh, you get a little more development of tunnel paths and routing. With the hub and spoke, it's a whole lot more dynamic client calling into the hubs. But with that, we end up with a breakout of where the traffic is, visibility by bandwidth, by volume, by session count. You can see where everything is running. In this particular case, ISP1 is their preferred carrier. They route just about everything on it, but we have rules to identify that. In order for that to function, you look at the SD-WAN rules. In this case, we go to the different locations, things going to the administrative building where the data center lies. We run a health check on it based on latency to see if the availability and latency is there. Then we route in across these members, so forth, to their other locations. This can get very granular. You can structure these SD-WAN rules per application, per source IP address, and pick up very specific data paths so that you can load balance across. You can put high critical on a more trusted transport, and so forth. In order to validate that these paths are available, the SD-WAN solution has these performance SLAs. These are tests that can be created to validate path and set criteria around each check. Here's a very straightforward one. We're pinging Google's DNS. We're using both participants, both of the underlying transport. We set criteria, and if it fails 5 times at a half a millisecond or 500 millisecond response time, then we fail over to the other link. We can set these criteria differently across the board. We can also utilize different levels of testing. You can do HTTP and expect certain responses. You can leverage different weighting on these tests to establish what rule criteria you want to instantiate. It's very customizable, or it can be very simple. The example that Ed showed us, their policies and their rules are very complex. Their voice solution was still hung off an MPLS environment, so we had to do direct drop-off for certain traffic. Certain traffic had to go to data centers. Certain traffic had to go specifically to other node points that were in private cloud offerings. So it can do as much as you want. I would also ask that anybody that has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we can discuss a little bit later as we go through this. With the SD-WAN solution set up, you have all of your pathing. Now, this is a complete smart or software-defined office space. So as I indicated, there is both the firewall as the WAN edge, replaces your routing decision maker. It replaces your security perimeter. We can take, and as we look at zone-based firewalling, each of these interfaces within the zone are a different VLAN or IP space defined at the location. They all become directly configurable from a firewall policy perspective, or you can build zone-based firewalling and add different zones to it so that the firewall policy set and the SD-WAN traffic path set become more easily managed as a zone. As we go through and look each one of these interfaces, we come to the security component. That security component is based on IPv4 policy based. This is you can view and configure based on source and destination interfaces, and then the granularity underneath that for different IP spaces, different interfaces, different directions, different destinations, applying different policies based on UTM. In this particular case, a lot of these are local to local. So we're just doing more layer 4 configuration. But once you look at the internet, there are capabilities of going to a much more granular and a UTM based solution where we add different security profiles based on the application control. So we get application visibility at layer 7, we get web filtering. In this particular case, from this particular network, we're allowing everything to go out, but we are watching it. We have the ability to do SSL inspection. We can do deep packet inspection by proxying or allow just flow and validate that the certification is there, logging everything and moving forward from there. Again, this solution does replace your router WAN edge, so all of your routing is handled at the edge. We have all of the directly connected networks that are defined based on the switch infrastructure in the background. We have the tunnel endpoints that are defined in a unroutable space, but known locally. The internet facilities, and then we have static routing with the specific remote side destinations over which tunnels within the zones. This solution is also fully BGP, OSPF. Your standard routing protocols are fully supported and can be configured if that is a desire. As we look at how the SD-WAN environment is running, you have your ISPs, how many sessions are going on, what type of data, upload and download speeds, and we can validate status of them, as well as where the traffic is going. Now, that traffic is set up by a priority. or by the policies. So it tends to move all over the place, and we can see a lot of that under the statuses and see here at just a quick glance what each interface is doing from an input and output. And this is all very simply configured and very easy to get visibility into the environment. Once we have all of the SD-WAN set up, we have, as Ed indicated, a Wi-Fi and switch controller built into the environment, so you have a single point of view. We can establish the SD-WAN solution, or I'm sorry, we can configure the wireless solution, define each SSID we want to run, define groups of APs that have very specific build outs, setting up the profiles. We can define what type of radio, how power is used, what values are used, and it's all very simple and straightforward, out of the box, easy to go. We can define up to any number of SSIDs. There is a maximum of 7 SSIDs that can be supported by the APs. That's a traditional radio limitation in most environments, but it is all capable and functional within this solution. We also have, as Ed indicated, the FortiLink. This is an automated link that connects into the switches using industry accepted protocols to do the configuration and control in a downward solution to the managed switches. This is a view. We have the FortiGate as a controller, hands down to a multi-tiered solution, identifying each device, giving you access to drill into any particular port. You can figure out what it is, how it's configured, do all of the port management straight from the single pane of glass on the FortiGate. There's a little bit of information to pull, so it's coming up. And this pulls everything for the switch, each port, what its features are, what its native VLAN, allowed VLANs, and these are fully functional, standard switching, PoE provided. It does identify what devices are on them from the infrastructure perspective, and this is all automated with the solution. To get a little better idea of how this actually looks out, the environment builds out a topology. It's called, within the switch fabric, it identifies the edge, and I know that's incredibly small, where we can drill down into the FortiGate, its uplinks to the internet. We can determine what the device is, what it's supporting, how it's connected, and then drill down into each device, whether it's a switch or an AP, how they tier, and then the devices that are being seen coming in on those devices. We get a fair amount of information based on the edge discovery that just takes place. Nothing is configured on these endpoints. This is all observed information, so you can see the device, the MAC address, the IP address it received, what the lease is, what interface within the environment it's connected to. It does some discovery on what type of hardware and software it's running. You can, from this, click down and add these devices into your firewall configuration to use as objects in building policy if you so desire. And this is all gained basically by looking at the device traffic. We can also look at it from sent and received packets and get that information. We can sort by bandwidth, by sessions. This is a physical topology look. It automatically also provides you with a logical topology look on what networks and what devices on that network, drilling down and finding your endpoints, being able to control them, applying policy to them with a NAC solution for authentication against Active Directory or against MAC address whitelisting is all built into the solution and configurable if you so desire. Moving on to how the system defines policies. Again, each device is in a policy. We can take and build policies out based on sources. We can establish these based on whether it's an address, a user, internet service. All that granularity is capable. The device is integrated into Active Directory, so you can use AD groups to create security policies. We can establish automatic antivirus scanning and malware scanning. We can do IPS if this was an outward facing or an inward facing from the internet. There's lots of feature functionality into it. We continue with visibility within the environment. Because it is application aware, it will constantly track what applications are running on your environment, what category they fall under. We can drill in and see who's doing it, what source, what destination, which policy it is being accepted, that traffic. If you want to make an adjustment to the policy, it's easy to drill down. We can establish if this is a destination we don't want to go, we can immediately drill down, see who's going there, if more are. We have the ability to look at all of the sessions going on in the device at any one time. The integration with FortiManager or the FortiAnalytics platform allows all of this information to be maintained historically, allows you to run queries against it, set alarms against it, trap against certain pieces and parts of it. We can look at the function of the network based on policy and which policy is getting hit, how much traffic, and then deal with, should that be there? How do we address if there is a problem, and so forth. A lot of visibility comes into whether you're looking at how the IPsec overlays are running, how much traffic is going between your sites and which tunnels are being utilized, whether they're up or down. We can address wireless client information. Again, we see every client on the wireless, what SSID, where it's coming from. We can get additional information as make, model, serial number, what the radios are, what channels, and so forth. We also have built-in amount of health, where we're seeing problems within it, top utilization, is there a problem, rogues, what kind of other environments are in the area. I know this particular place is in the middle of a city and there is a huge amount of traffic around it. Luckily, from a signal strength perspective, most of the interference is outside of usable space, so we're not too worried about it. Can dig into all of your routing as we talked about earlier. For those of us that are geeks and enjoy the command line, the environment is very straightforward from a command line perspective. It also allows us a troubleshooting distribution that is not typical in remote offices. You have packet capture capabilities, both from the GUI and from the command line. This is just an example of looking at who's talking to Google, and it will run from any interface and allow us to troubleshoot any particular filter you care to build, hosts, ports, applications, in and out of any particular interface. You can also look at the basic configuration is very English capable. This is an example of the configuration in this particular box. You can go in and configure this entire thing from the command line. If you're looking at building out interfaces, building out the different VDOMs or virtual domains. Again, here is the LAN interface and what it is, how it's defined. So for all those command jockeys, there's lots of fun there, and it's very easy to access and utilize. We're running up into only a few minutes left. I know that was an awful lot of information. I just wanted to poke around and give you some insight into what is capable with it. And now, if there are any questions, Ed and I are both available to answer. So I will stop sharing my screen and take questions. If I can. Do we have any questions in the chat?
I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. We can give it a few more moments, see if we have any.
Thank you, Julie.
So while we wait for questions to come in, I want to thank you guys again, Ed and Patrick, for your participation. I also want to thank all of our participants for joining us today. We hope you found this webcast informative and helpful to you and your organization. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, please feel free to contact us. Our contact information is currently being displayed, so don't hesitate to call or email us. Additionally, if you are interested in part 2 of this webinar series presented by Fortinet and GCOM, I'm going to put a link in the chat for more information on the upcoming webinar. And finally, in the next day or two, we will be emailing you all a link to an archived version of this webcast, along with a few additional resources, so you can view it again or pass along to a colleague. Thank you again for attending and have a great rest of your day.